Hi everybody. So apologies that I could not do a video last week. Mostly just had my allergies acting up again, and so I didn't really have the energy to do it, and so I did a blog post instead last week for the first time in a while. But yeah, so back on videos this week. This week, what I want to talk about is supplements. And I've talked about supplements a little bit in some past videos, but I think that they're enough of a topic that they deserve their own, much bigger video. And the most important thing there is that basically supplements are not nearly as important as people think. I get a lot of emails and questions and people saying, okay, should I do this supplement? Should I do that supplement? What supplement is going to help me with goals, XYZ and so on. And the reality is that supplements are a very small part of the picture. If you look at the overall picture, the real overall picture is mostly training and mostly recovery and mostly diet, and stuff like your supplementation is going to be a much smaller part of the picture. And that's really unfortunate because supplements are the most expensive part of the picture too. When you look at something like, what are the total costs of, getting in shape? Your food costs are going to be, part of it because, maybe you're eating a little bit differently when you're trying to get in shape. But that's basically replacing existing food costs. So it's probably not going to be that much more or less overall. It's going to be roughly similar, maybe a little bit more. That's about it. Likewise, the cost of going to a gym, that's a set cost. You're going to spend, however much going to the gym, and, that's it. Supplements are something where you are going to spend a crap ton of money to have supplements basically, every month. And, particularly some supplements can get really expensive for a very, very small benefit relative to the amount of money that you're spending. And so in some cases, yes, those supplements can work. Yes, they can be useful. But, it's something that you shouldn't worry about unless basically, A, you've got everything else in order. So you've got your diet, you've got your exercise, you've got your recovery all nailed down just the way you want it. And then B, it has to be, if you really, really care about those few extra percentage points, if you really, really care about being the best possible, exerciser that you can be. Because the reality, again, is that it is just a few small percentage points. Now, the perception that people have of supplements is that they have this perception of supplements as being super important when the reality is that they are not very important at all. And part of that is because of the supplement industry. So the supplement industry is very connected to the fitness industry, particularly to sort of the influencer, the Instagram fitness, sort of community, because supplements are kind of the biggest and most easiest way for someone who basically has some kind of a following to monetize that following without necessarily having to contribute anything to the conversation. So, if you have someone who's in great shape and they want to be a coach, okay, they've got to create all kinds of content showing that they're a good coach, they've got to work with people, they've got to be good at working with people, and so on. When you've got someone who's just in great shape, they look good, they have a following, but they don't necessarily have a good or a service that they can really sell to their followers, well, supplements are an easy way to do that. And so that's kind of why a lot of, big names in the fitness industry end up being attached to supplements. So, a lot of the, hardcore, like the really good bodybuilders basically end up having their own supplement lines, and they'll go out and say, oh yeah, I use these supplements, they're great, I love them. And, that makes money, they make sales, and, people buy those supplements, and boom, the bodybuilder makes money from it. And so, they're not going to tell you, hey, this doesn't do very much, right? Like, they're just not, if someone is trying to sell you the supplement because that is how they make their money, they're not going to be the person that goes to you and is like, yeah, okay, these don't really do that much, maybe they'll help a little bit, but mostly it's about putting money in my pocket, right? Like, no one's going to say that to you. And so that's why a lot of corners of the fitness industry are not really going to speak out about how supplements don't do very much, simply because they have that invested money interest in continuing to sell supplements because, they make money off of it too. I will say that the only fitness industry job that I ever got fired from, in fact, the only job I ever got fired from in general, It was working for a gym, and it was a very scummy gym. It was incredibly scummy. They would basically use a lot of sort of underhanded tactics to try and sort of force people into, working with a trainer for a long period of time or staying with the gym for a long period of time. They would kind of do this thing where, if it was like, okay, I want to break my contract, then, they would kind of do all these, intermediate steps to try and force people to stay into the contract or to sort of delay them or try to get them to sort of get discouraged and just let their contract run out. There was a lot of stuff happening in that gym that I wasn't cool with. And that's part of the reason why I ended up, getting fired, was because I just talked back to the manager when he was like, I want you to do something. But, so in that job, there was, basically, shortly after I started there, they had us go through this sort of seminar, and it was essentially a seminar where you would go out and there would be a supplement sales rep who would kind of talk up to you, okay, here's how powerful and good these supplements are. Here's, why why your clients need them and so on. And they would give you sort of all of these, sales tactics, or sort of they would just pump you up and make you hyper believe in these products so that you could then, go out and you could say the same thing to the people that you see at the gym or whatever when you're trying to sell these supplements. And of course, we got paid based on, what supplements we sold. And we were also, expected to sell supplements. And there was sort of a whole script that we were supposed to follow with sales. And they would sort of say, okay, you need to be trying to make sure that you're selling supplements right here and telling them sort of what supplements they need to succeed and that sort of thing. And, it wasn't a good situation, right? And that sort of, that was sort of the most blatant and scummy version of it. But, it's sort of the same sort of dynamic that's just plays out in the rest of the fitness industry, maybe smaller or larger. So kind of the one thing that a lot of people may have heard or believed is that the supplement industry in the US is unregulated. And that's sort of true, but not really. The supplement industry is regulated. There are regulations, but things are done in a sort of after the fact sort of approach. Instead of simply, reviewing every single product before it goes out the door to make sure that it's safe and so on, the way you would with something more, important like a drug, where you need to make sure that things are, safe before you get them out. Supplements are a little bit more kind of like, oh, you can just put it out the door, and then if it causes issues, if, consumers take it and they start reporting issues, then we take it off the shelves. It's done afterwards instead of before. So it's not, there's no sort of there's not that preventative measure. There's sort of more of the, after the fact, okay, let's solve the problem, clean up the mess. And so, because the supplement industry is only minimally regulated, they have there's a lot of companies that have developed sort of sneaky tactics over time. And, you can Google this stuff, right? Like you can Google all of these different topics and you can find examples of this stuff. There's things where supplement companies would basically just take a supplement and they would cut it with cheap ingredients, like filler ingredients, so that they could sell more of it, make more money, because it costs less to make, and then you sell it. And of course, that means that the supplement itself is less effective, contains less of the effective ingredient, but they don't care. It's not like consumers are able to find this out. Most consumers aren't going to sit down and do, chemical testing on your protein powder to make sure that it has what it says on the label. And, there've been all these sort of, not like studies, but, like investigations where people go out and they do test a lot of supplements and they find they don't even contain the active ingredients they say they do, or they don't contain them in the amounts that they say they do, and so on. So what you get in the bottle may not even be what they say is in the bottle, period. Then there's stuff like some stories of basically supplement providers who would mix steroids into their supplements. So they would mix in oral steroids. People would take them, they would start to see good results, and then the supplement company takes out the steroids before, people can really start sniffing around and finding out. And then, of course, they've got this good reputation. Oh, this supplement really works. It really has, powerful effects. and then people keep coming back to it, but now it's useless because it doesn't contain the steroids anymore. And of course, companies have gotten, just fingered for, having contained all kinds of banned substances. There's people that take, various supplements, and then they are, supposed to go compete in sort of tested, federations or whatever. And it turns out that they failed their drug test and they didn't even know that they were taking banned substances because they were stuck into their supplements, without them knowing. So, there's all sorts of stuff like this. Like you don't have to dig very far into sort of the news or to the internet to find a lot of this stuff. You just need to do a bit of Googling and you can find it. It's pretty easy. So, that's not to say that every single supplement company is corrupt. It's just to say that this is sort of the expected, level of, practice that a lot of these businesses are at. They're not necessarily incentivized to do things the right way. They're just incentivized to sort of get something out the door, sell a product, make some money, and whether or not the supplements actually help you is sort of secondary to, again, that business. Another problem that I think that, many people don't really realize is because a lot of people misunderstand the way science works, right? A single study saying that a supplement may be effective is not necessarily a very powerful defense of something. It's, sort of like if you get one study that says, that it's a positive result, it's like, okay, that may have been an outlier. It may be that, you do 5 more similar studies and it turns out that the other 5 studies say that it's the other direction or that there's not much of an effect at all. But once you've got that one positive study, what you can do is you can say, here, look, we have a positive study. This stuff works. Let's put it in a bottle. Let's sell it. People will buy it because it has this study backing it up. And boom, they've made money. And so very often supplement companies are very guilty of doing that sort of thing where they take, a little bit of flawed research. They say, look, this supplement works. Here's the research proving it. And then it turns out later, somewhere down the line, when people, do some more research on it, that of course it doesn't work. Or, maybe it has even a negative effect, but, it just how happens that one study, had that one outlier result. And so they can use that to sell supplements. People will buy it. By the time it's debunked, it's too late. They've already made their money. People have already wasted a lot of money taking that supplement. So, you should be skeptical. You should be skeptical when facing this industry. You should be skeptical with supplements in a general sense. You should almost never just, believe the things that they put on the label. You should try and do some research. You need to be a little bit more careful about buying supplements because you're not really ever sure what you're going to get. And you need to sort of at the very least, do a little baseline level of digging. Another thing that sort of people sort of mistake the way supplements or basically vitamins and minerals work in a general sense, right? So let's take your vitamins. You've got generally 2 types of vitamins. You've got water-soluble vitamins and you've got fat-soluble vitamins. And so what that means is that basically those vitamins will bind to, water or fat in your body. And that's sort of how you, consume it. That's how it sort of gets digested and used. And so what ends up happening is that water-soluble vitamins, they bind to water, but then they are, processed and they're, basically, you pee it out pretty quickly. It just goes out of your body the next time you use the toilet. And so, those kind of vitamins, they go through your body very quickly and sort of, you think about it and let's say you megadose with like a water-soluble vitamin, right? You take 2,000, 5,000, 10,000% of your daily recommended dose. Well, that's not going to mean anything because your body's just going to take and use the amount that it needs and the rest of it's just going to get peed out. Like that's it. And then on the other hand, you have your fat-soluble vitamins. Your fat-soluble vitamins will bind to your fats, and so they can actually stay in your body a lot longer. And in this case, it's the exact opposite problem, right? Where it's not that it doesn't stay in your body, it's that it stays in your body a ton. And so you need to actually be very careful because if you overdose on these kinds of vitamins, it will actually potentially cause negative health effects because you're just overloading your body with these vitamins. They're filling up your fat cells. It's becoming a problem. And those are the sorts of things that you can really overdose on those kinds of vitamins. And so, there's not really a middle ground here, right? Like, it's not like you're in a situation where, I take a certain recommended daily amount of a certain vitamin, and now I've taken twice that, so I'm twice as healthy. That's not how it works, right? Like, there's a certain range that's good, and then, if you're above that range, that may cause adverse effects. It may just get peed out. whatever. It may do nothing, but it's not helping you necessarily. It's not necessarily making anything better. And then, of course, if you get less than that recommended amount, yeah, you're going to have health problems. But the reality is that most people are not nutrient deficient. Most of our nutrients are generally covered by sort of the diet that we're eating in a general sense, so long as we're, eating a generally balanced diet. And so, most people don't need a ton of additional vitamins or minerals. They need them if, for example, you've done a blood test, you went to the doctor, you did a blood test, and they say, oh, you're deficient in this specific vitamin. Okay, well, that's a case where you do need to supplement with that kind of vitamin in order to make sure that you're covering your bases, or maybe change your diet a bit so that you're consuming more of that vitamin in your diet. But it's not like there's this secret if I take this mega dose of vitamin C and this mega dose of vitamin D and I just slather it all in fish oil, suddenly I'm going to get 5 times as jacked. Like, that's just not how it works. Your body doesn't react on that sort of level. More is not necessarily better, and that's the way that a lot of people sell this sort of idea of a lot of sort of BS diet fads and supplements, is by giving you the impression that more is better. They're like, look at all the nutrients in this, look at all the vitamins in this. This has got so many vitamins. This has got such a high level of, whatever vitamin, so it must be healthy for you. And it's like, well, why would that be healthy for you? Why would getting a mega dose of, X or Y or Z vitamin necessarily be healthy for you? We don't, we're not critical of that. We don't think about that. And so when it comes to sort of things like vitamin supplementation, we're used to thinking that more is better, and it's really not necessarily. There may be cases where, yes, you do need to, supplement with a vitamin because you're that person who's deficient in it for whatever reason, but, for the rest of us, it's just like, you don't need it. It's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of money. You're just, throwing money into the supplement seller's pocket. And sort of the supplements that do work, that have a positive effect when it comes to your health and fitness, they're boring now. They're so, everyone recommends them. They're so boring. People come to you and they're like, what's the secret supplement? What's the secret sauce? What's the pill? What's going to save me all my hardships and just make me jacked? And, people always say the same handful of things. They say protein powder works, especially if you're not hitting your protein targets. They say creatine works for building strength. They say, a multivitamin may help if you're deficient in, some of your vitamins, especially if you're, say losing weight and you are, sort of in a lower calorie per day diet. It can be easier to cover your bases with that. There's a slightly greater risk of malnutrition there. BCAAs, leucine supplementation, that can really help if you're not getting a ton of good protein in elsewhere. Like if you are you're eating a plant-based diet, you're eating a lot of plant-based proteins, that can really help a lot. But if you're getting in a lot of protein from, your meat, your dairy, your eggs, protein powder, you probably don't need to supplement with BCAAs and leucine because you're getting enough of that stuff elsewhere. And then other supplements, just again, they're useful in specific situations, again, where you have certain deficiencies, or maybe you have certain training goals, or maybe you have a very specific situation where, like this might help actually a little bit in your situation just because it's a very specific situation. But this advice, that supplement advice that I've just given you, that's the same advice basically everyone gives. It's boring, it's not sexy. No one wants to hear it. Because, they're tired of being told that protein powder is, everyone knows that protein powder is a good supplement. Everyone uses it. That's how, everyone in the world gets their protein in using protein powder. So people are always looking for something new and exciting. And the reality is that the stuff that works is stuff that we have known about for a long time. It's not exciting anymore. It's just, the same old stuff, basically. In terms of good advice, in terms of, actually, what can I do about my supplementation? Follow the supplements I recommended above. Do some research. Do some research on the company that you're considering buying supplements from. Don't just buy the cheapest stuff you can find. I used to buy some stuff that was at my local Kroger or whatever, my local supermarket. and it was garbage. And I in retrospect, I know that it was garbage. It probably did not actually contain very much actual protein. But you know, I was young, I was not too smart. You know, I didn't really know to be aware of this sort of stuff. And I was like, man, this stuff is so cheap. It's like the cheapest around. And it was garbage. It tasted like crap. It did not mix the way you would expect protein to mix. You could tell that you know, in retrospect, I can tell that there was something off about the composition of it, right? But you know, that's a mistake that I made in part because I just didn't know any better. I didn't know to look for that sort of thing. I only know in retrospect, oh, okay, that probably wasn't a great, you know, that probably wasn't a great protein powder. But, you know, that's not to say that you should look for the most expensive stuff around. That's not to say that you always have to go for sort of the top of the line supplements, the most expensive stuff, because, you know, again, they're not necessarily going to be any better than cheaper stuff. You just need to try and find a company that you know, that looks to you like it's reasonably trustworthy. And that means, you know, do some research on the company, make sure that you know, check out, make sure that they have certifications to show that they're, you know, like good GMP certification, good manufacturing practices. You know, basically just means that they, you know, do some baseline, you know, submitting their company to an external authority to get vetted to make sure that they're not doing, you know, sketchy stuff. And again, none of this is going to be perfect, right? Like none of this is going to ensure that you're definitely going to get good supplements, because again, at the end of the day, you're not the person, you're not in that factory, right? Like you don't actually know how their stuff is made and so on. But do, you know, a baseline little bit of research and just avoid the companies that you can tell seem a bit sketchy, don't have any certifications, don't have any sort of anything at all to back them up, that are selling sort of garbage, cheap supplements, you know, that, you know, probably taste bad and probably, you know, seem a little bit off. Aside from that, I would like to emphasize, again, much like I said at the beginning of the video, supplements are the most expensive thing for the least benefit that you're going to get. You know, you can spend a lot, you know, it makes more sense to focus on spending your money on your gym, right? Like your gym, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck in terms of just spending your money on a gym membership and just using it. Just make sure you're actually training, following a good program, making sure that you're getting good recovery, and making sure that you're covering your diet in terms of getting in enough protein, getting in enough calories to suit your training needs. At the end of the day, if you have all that other stuff in place, then you can start worrying about supplements. I think that pretty much everyone can benefit from protein and creatine. You know, those supplements are, you know, they've been around for a long time. They're not super expensive. And so, you know, they're generally pretty accessible. But when it comes to a lot of these smaller supplements that are more niche, they are more expensive, especially, you know, some of them are like pretty expensive per dosage, and, you know, in a way that like that stuff will really add up into a monthly bill very quickly. You know, do some research before you consider that sort of thing. I can highly recommend Examine.com. Examine.com is a website that exists specifically to do science. You know, they do like breakdowns of all the scientific research into various supplements. And so what they will do is they will tell you what a supplement actually does, or, you know, close enough to what we know based on the research that exists, what it actually does. And in many cases, you know, yes, supplements don't do very much. Yes, they might have some small effect, but it's unclear how good of an effect that is, what that effect is useful for, etc. But, you know, again, just do the research. If you're considering looking at taking a new supplement, do the research, figure out if there's actually any scientific evidence for it. Don't just trust the guy that you see at, you know, GNC, or, you know, the personal trainer at your gym who's telling you that you need to take a specific supplement, whatever. Don't trust any of the people trying to sell you supplements. Just do some research on the supplement itself, see if it works, do some research on the company that you want to buy your supplements from, make sure they're generally trustworthy, and then, and only then, buy supplements and take them. And again, this all assumes that you have everything else in order: your training, your recovery, your diet. And this is the last, you know, this is one of the smaller pieces of the puzzle. This is one of the later things that you worry about. So I hope that this video has been helpful to everybody. I am not covering Q&A today because I am a little bit lazy. I forgot to share the Q&A link earlier this week and get some more questions. So I will save Q&A for next week. I promise I'll do some Q&A next week. Maybe maybe just gather some extra questions and make it into a whole Q&A episode. Whatever the case is, I hope that you all have a great week, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.